Joe and I have seen a lot in our careers, but we also see the missing gaps for the new grads and how they often feel like they're failing, but why it's not them that's failing, why it's really truly us that's failing them. 5 reasons new grad nurses feel like they're failing and why it isn't their fault is actually something that Joe and I have been talking about in the comments section on Facebook a lot over the last few months. And I just had this brainchild idea of like, why don't we put our faces together on the same screen and have a real talk conversation from 2 nurses who have seen a lot. With 37 years of combined experience, Joe and I have seen a lot in our careers, but we also see the missing gaps for the new grads and how they often feel like they're failing, but why it's not them that's failing, why it's really truly us that's failing them. So we're here to talk with you about 5 reasons that new grad nurses feel like they're failing and why it isn't their fault. Joe, why are you so passionate about this topic?
Well, selfishly, at some point in our lives, we're going to need to have access to healthcare. And if the new grads aren't prepared well now with a solid foundation, I worry what comes when we are the ones on the other side of things. If we don't do what we can now, it's a very realistic thing that we're going to bear the brunt of that as a healthcare recipient. And some people may already be dealing with that as both the caregiver and the care recipient. So I think that we owe it to ourselves to make sure we develop the best new grads that we can. Um, I also think our profession is really in danger of um, complete burnout, that we are going to lose more
Mm-hmm.
staff than we can sustain, and we won't be able to do more with less anymore.
Oh, whew, preach it. I feel like every single nurse, whether you are a new nurse or a seasoned nurse, feel the burden of that statement. Like, holy smokes. I know I feel it. Like, I got goosebumps when you said that. So, no, I know I feel that. We are absolutely in danger. Like, nursing is on the brink of burnout. I feel like that's a great title for the next article. Coming, right? Teaser. Um, so, one of the reasons that Joe and I talked about that nurses feel like they're failing is because we set them up to fail before they even graduate. Joe, tell me more about what comes to your mind when I say we're setting them up for failure before they even graduate.
Well, I look at some of the reports that my new grads, when I'm precepting, tell me, and a lot goes to their programs, which don't provide them a competent clinical experience.
Mm-hmm.
I've been doing this field for a while, but it seems since COVID, when a lot of everything in the entire world went digital and online, um, they never recovered the in-person clinical skills, and that's based on their report. So I feel like we don't provide the best foundation. Um,
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, I was talking with a new grad in the break room just a couple of days ago, and she was saying that she only has 1/4 of school left. She's 3/4 of the way through, and she still doesn't feel confident in starting an IV because she just has not had the hands-on experience in the clinical setting that she requires to grow that skill, which means that she's going to graduate nursing school not feeling competent or confident even starting an IV on her patient. And then a hospital is going to hire her and they're basically going to say, well, you should have learned that in nursing school. And I've seen that a lot on my nursing unit. Have you heard or observed or seen new nurses talking about the fact that, like, well, you should have learned that, and like just being expected to know things that they don't know?
all the time. Um, I don't know if there is a reason why they should have known people. I hate the they shouldas
They should
because
have.
I do. I don't like them because oftentimes in my practice, when I became a nurse, if I was explaining something to a new learner, whether it was a student nurse, whether it was a new grad, whether it was a patient or their family members, it was it was never an expectation that you knew. It was explain to me what you know so that I can help recover what you don't know. And in some cases, show me that you can do this. There was never that I should have or you should have. There was a validation that I noticed you knew how to do something, or even better than that, I noticed you didn't know how to do something, and I'm going to show you how to do it.
Hmm. I think even more so than that too, with like they're noticing that they have gaps in what they learn versus what's in practice, and they're relying on like the social media university, right, to fill in those gaps. And so sometimes it's not even a conversation of tell me what you know so I can fill in the gaps. It's a like tell me what you think you know so I can fill in the gaps and help steer you right if maybe you've learned something that's not correct. And I applaud them for, reaching out, for trying to learn, for using the tools in their hand. But sometimes TikTok University and YouTube University can be really dangerous when it comes to teaching them those skills. And so not only are they set up to fail with a suboptimal clinical experience, but then we also have to realize that they're filling in gaps with social media universities. And also in nursing schools are great at teaching you the skills in a controlled environment. But you and I both know that there is no such thing as control when you actually hit the floor and you have a full patient load. And then, when they're tested in ideal conditions and thrown into chaos and they're struggling, like it's no wonder, right?
Well, and I think before you get to any of the major clinical skills, which are also important, they really are the backbone to what we're supposed to be doing as far as providing care. Our clinical skills are paramount. But there's another skill that you touched on that we don't educate or reinforce in the nursing program, and maybe not afterwards either, and that's the confidence.
Mm-hmm.
There's a component in this industry that if I'm hearing what I hear from seasoned nurses about the way other people interact with us and some scary stories about maybe what happens when you call a doctor, in order for me to feel like I can ask questions, I have to be confident. I at least have to have the confidence to raise my voice and say, hey, I don't know and I need help. And that I think introduces a whole world of then we can help manage clinical skills. But we shoot people down for every mistake when they're the learner.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel as though eliminate or not enforcing confidence in our nurses, um, we won't branch out for more skills even down the line,
Mm-hmm.
you know, to
That's
try the
so
next
good.
thing that I don't know how to do. I might be great at starting an IV, but if I haven't changed the pick dressing in a while, I might not think to ask how to do that, you know?
Right. That's like the perfect segue into what we are going to talk about later, but we'll just pull it up to the top of the list and make this our bullet point number two. And that is that orientation is not set up to guide, it's much more set up to criticize. And I can't tell you how many times I've seen a new nurse just on the edge of tears because they've been told all the things that they did wrong. It's terrible. Tell me more about your experience with that.
Well, I often wonder why we do that. I've been through many orientations. As part of my leadership role, I have helped to orient in
Mm-hmm.
programs across the board using different systems, and um, I wonder why we don't come from a place of can do, come from a place of here's what you did right. You could tweak it a little better. We can try this. Or that didn't really go so well, and I'm going to show you the way to succeed. Um, I hear a lot of nurses. Um, if I'm good at something and you're also a nurse, I think you should be good at those things.
Mm-hmm.
But as you and I know, we work in vastly different fields, right?
Correct.
Um, you're in critical care and emergency, and I am in oncology and long-term care.
Mm-hmm.
Vast. If either of us approach the other in our workspace, I shouldn't knock you for not knowing something. We might use the same drugs in totally different ways.
Correct. Correct. I'm sure there's tons about your field that I didn't even know that I didn't know.
And we need to recognize that in our new people too. It
Mhm.
all of our years of experience, new people will get there if we keep them on board.
Correct. Well, I think this also speaks to like the orientation process of number one, it's set up to criticize. And you and I were talking about how it, depending on the facility, it can be unstructured, it can be vague. There are not set check-in times or guidelines for how those check-ins should go. And even this day and age, you have nurses with 2, 3 years of experience mentoring the brand new nurses. So there are brand new nurses that were criticized, that don't know what they don't know, training brand new nurses in a way that feeds that criticism. So I think what the system is calling for is kind of a two-pronged approach. The first is, how are we supporting our mentors with language that is building confidence? Because they were given language to criticize, and they don't know what they don't know. So how are we supporting our mentors? But even more than that, how are we structuring our orientation programs? And just a simple sheet giving them the words of like, what do you feel like is going really well? What do you feel like your biggest challenge is? On a scale of 0 to 10, 10 is like, I'm super confident and crushing it, and 1 is like, I quit. Like, how confident do you feel? And what do you think you would need in order to give yourself a higher number? Like, if they just had that structure, like it would go a long way in terms of opening conversations to like, okay, now I understand what you do feel great at. Like, let's highlight that and let's help you do more of that independently. And now I understand what you don't feel great at. And that scale of 0 to 10, and help me understand what would need to shift to give you a higher number. Like, all of your clues to skill and confidence lie in that question alone. But our mentors are not prepared with this.
And I think in some places the consistency of a mentor
Mm-hmm.
for a new grad. Um, to your point, I was I was not orienting. I had a new nurse
Mm-hmm.
who was on her own for a while, but we had encountered a wound dressing that she was not expecting to see what was underneath it. Um,
Mm-hmm.
she then confided in me that she had never had to do a wound dressing like that before.
Mm-hmm.
It was just not part of her program. We worked through it, and now she is seeking out wound programs so she can become a wound nurse. Um, I received a new nurse with the idea of, I can't do this. We did it together, and she felt proficient that now she's intrigued and she wants to do more. Um, it works just as powerfully in the negative. I
Mm-hmm.
see a nurse, she can't do something, I knock her for it, which in the end doesn't help anybody anyway.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then she maybe loses a little bit of that ambition that brought her into nursing programs in the first place. Um,
Yeah.
the I think there's also an idea about what kind of person is becoming a nurse right now,
Mm-hmm.
um, and what kind of attitudes they may have, and what kind of um, shortcomings they were raised with.
Mm-hmm.
And rather than take our role as leaders and address some of that and develop them, we kind of just like write it out and say, oh, well, that's their generation, or
Mm. That's
that's
so good.
these younger people. And I don't think that's really our role either. If that is what we received, meet somebody where they are and help them,
Right.
right? So they can
That's so
help
good.
us.
So good. And that's one of the points on our outline, right? It's like point number 3, we judge their values instead of seeing their value. And I know that this is one, like, you wrote a whole entire novel in a comment section on Facebook. So I would love for you to dive a little bit deeper into that specific component of like, judging their values because they're this generation or that generation versus truly seeing the value that they bring to the field. So tell me more about your thoughts on that.
I feel like for a long time, and maybe this happened when I was younger either, also, but I don't recall being brought up in this. But I feel like for a long time, um, younger generations of nurses, of anybody, have not been looked at as workaholics, um,
Mm-hmm.
have been viewed as though spending me time or valuing their time with their family is somehow not as okay as working 90 hours a week. Or, and
Mm-hmm.
I think that that shapes, it's almost like we don't like them. Anyway, we don't know them. We don't understand the words that they use or the language.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but we we judge them based on ourselves. We don't meet them, and we don't look at the fact that despite anything that we think is wrong with them, um I'm sorry, I got a technical glitch. Okay. Somebody was calling and I don't know how to do two things at once. Um we see all of these things that we claim that we don't like. And I'm not talking you or me. I'm just talking, I will be biased about all generations for the sake of generalizing. Um, and we negate the fact that still, if we think that they're all of these ways, their ambition is to be a healthcare worker, right? Their
Mm-hmm.
ambition is to take care of others. And then maybe we listen to their attitudes or how things are hard. Um, well, you're just going to have to do it. Sometimes when they point out reality, we don't like that it stings because reality is sometimes that things are harder than they should be. Reality is sometimes that things don't make sense the way we're expected to perform them. Or even if they don't make sense, they just don't match. If I was taught something and now I go to work and I have to do a completely other thing, I don't understand the difference.
Mm-hmm.
And then we knock them for not going along with it and asking questions.
Mm-hmm.
I talked with a new, she's not a new nurse. She was an LPN for a number of years, but she became an RN and I got to orient her. And we were talking about every question seems to be taken as if it was an attack.
That is fact. Oh my goodness.
And I think that's discouraging the learning process.
Right.
That's if I'm going to shut down every time you try to learn, or I'm going to shut you down, I'm not going to shut down because I know everything. But if I'm
Right.
going to shut you down every time you ask me a question, even if it's just because I don't like the words you used when you asked me that question, um, you're not going to ask me questions because I didn't make that easy for you. Um,
Right.
One of the things that I think is important to understand about generational language differences.
Mm.
Um, I have a stepson. He is 12. He knows words like sus and riz, and I don't know those words. I've learned them. If I use them wrong, he told me yesterday. But one thing that young people do this thing where they say, "I'm not doing that," instead of saying, I don't know how to do that. So if you think I'm going to do it, you're going to have to show me first. But they don't drag it out. It's a slang. It's a shortcut. I'm not doing that. Well,
Mm-hmm.
you're going to have to. Why don't we just talk about why not?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Tell me more about what you mean when you say you're not doing that. Help me understand what that means to you. Help me understand what you thought you were getting into when you took this job, right? Like, let's ask questions to seek understanding. And I think we could probably do a whole nother session on this, but I totally agree with you that in general, every little question is received as an attack rather than a true curiosity. Like, help me understand that question a little bit better, right? Like, as your mentor, I'm not doing that. Like, what does that mean? Is that like LOL? Like, is that shortcut for something? Like, what does that actually mean to you when you're not doing? Does it mean you're not comfortable doing that? Does it mean you've never done it? Does it mean like this job is a mismatch for you because this is a skill you're just not willing to do because it doesn't fit your personality? Like, help me understand, right? And that's
And,
exactly what you're talking about. And this is where, when we shut them down, they turn to YouTube University because it's easy.
and I do believe it is our responsibility, even if I am not assigned as the mentor, depending on what my work environment looks like, I may be in the proximity of new people no matter what. I do believe it is our job as the elder nurses, um, that it's up to us to seek that out.
Mm-hmm.
I
Yep.
I think if we have a bias that younger people, or I know they're not all younger, but newer people, if we have a bias that there's an issue with respectful tones or ways their professionalism, if we believe that truly,
Mm-hmm.
then we accept that that's going to be something we have to do for them. We have to open up the doors for them.
Mm-hmm.
If or else we're not using that bias in a helpful way. We're doing, like you say, we're just trying to criticize. And I can pick apart somebody too, but how does that help our industry? How
Mm-hmm.
does that help the patients who are presented right now or in the future? How
Mm-hmm.
does it help us when we're in the bed? You
Oh,
know,
I know. It doesn't. That's how.
it doesn't.
It doesn't. Well, we were also talking about point number 4, which is rushed programs are producing underprepared nurses. And this really ties in with the orientation that doesn't really guide. So we're talking about, like, in response to COVID and these fast track nursing programs that are just churning out new grads faster, and they're showing up on the job with even less training than is actually required. So again, this also kind of ties in with, like, they feel like they're failing before they even graduate, because then, they show up with this RN behind their name, and there's this automatic expectation that, like, maybe you and I had incredibly rigorous training, right? Like in school, but then, like, for me, I also had a job where it was literally my job to do clinicals and get paid for it while I was going to school. So by the time I graduated and became an actual nurse, like, I had some really great skills. And just walking in with that expectation of, like, well, I knew that. Like, why don't you know that? Well, like, when I became a nurse 20 years ago, a lot has changed since then. I can't just assume that they know what they know. And, rushing them through these programs is like putting them at the doorstep of this brand new profession, feeling totally unprepared. It's like a mom sending a child off to kindergarten with no lunchbox, right?
That's a great analogy. Um, that is, it is, because what's going to that's perfect analogy, I think. Now, I want to ask you, do you see differences based on the setting for the new grad? Um, what I mean is, being part of a hospital system versus being part of a long-term care system, I see a lower expectation for our teams in some of those long-term care arenas
Mm-hmm.
than I see in a hospital environment. And I wonder, does the orientation, is it also a mismatch in those more acute areas?
Mm-hmm. That's a great question. And this is one that I absolutely believe there is a different level of expectation. When you are in a critical care environment, you have to know your ACLS protocols. You have to know how to start CPR. You have to know how to turn on suction and clear an airway. You have to know where your ambu bag is, because your job as an ER nurse is to be prepared for an emergency, which creates a completely different level of expectation than somebody who's learning how to change a dressing on a wound, right? Two incredibly different environments. And one environment, we're talking about the difference between life and death, and in a very short time period, and having to make quick decisions. Whereas in another environment, there is opportunity to slow down the pace of learning, to really check understanding through each part of that process. And I personally do not believe, and of course, like my experience in different hospitals is limited. So, what I can speak for is in my experience, I don't believe that the amount of time that they get for orientation is enough. It's just flat out not enough for them to develop those skills. And I also don't believe that the flow in which they follow is detailed enough for them to truly understand what benchmarks they need to be meeting. A simple example is a conversation I have with my new grads of is like, do you know how to set up suction properly? Do you know how to set up a room properly? Do you know what it even means to be prepared for an emergency? Like if we're doing a hallway bed and there is no suction on the wall and that patient needs to be suctioned, do you know where to go? Do you know that there's a suction unit on the side of every crash cart? Right? And these are things like none of those things are in orientation. They're all things that like I've noticed as a mentor, there's a gap in learning, there's a gap in understanding, there's a gap in just like teaching them the burden of the responsibility of that preparedness and helping them really understand what it means for themselves, for their patients, for their licenses, like how truly risky it is when they get into those critical care environments. And I do feel like their orientation process and sort of the vagueness of it, like, okay, it's week 4, you're supposed to be handling, um, you know, up to like four patients right now. Like, okay, well, like, what does that actually mean? Like, for critical care patients, like for patients who are like more like urgent care patients, like what are we talking about? So yes, I would totally and completely agree. And then, this is like as we wrap up, we were also talking about the fact that they graduate without truly practicing nursing. So what are your final thoughts on these topics?
I think my final thoughts, number one, I really want to thank you for having me for this live
Mhm.
talk.
Yeah, this is
It,
great.
it it is a passion of mine that we leave a legacy, a solid legacy,
Hmm.
when we are preparing to advance or vacate our roles, whichever, that we
Hmm.
leave a solid legacy in our place. I just think that's, as
Hmm.
care providers, that's our responsibility. Um, and so I'm really happy to have the opportunity to delve into this a little bit.
Hmm.
My final thought is that we're never without the opportunity to start doing better,
Hmm.
right?
Yep.
We all individually can change some piece of what we see by being the mentor. And I think having the dialogue and welcoming new people and acknowledging that they have it hard. They may even have it harder than
Hmm.
we had it,
Yeah.
um, just like we may have had it harder than people before us had it.
Hmm.
Uh, and we always have the opportunity to make this right and develop people. And
Hmm.
I think it starts with confidence. And my favorite mnemonic, maybe it's not a mnemonic, a rhyme about making sure that our new graduates are confident, competent, and capable, that they are confident enough to go out and try, that they are competent to be safe
Hmm.
and to ask questions, and capable that we provide them what they truly need, that they're not MacGyvering every solution
Hmm.
in the midst of um, delivering care.
Amen. Amen. I'm sure that this is something that Joe and I could go on and on about for days because we're both so fired up about leaving this profession better than when we came. And I hope that this conversation has really triggered sort of two call outs. The first call out is to the leaders and mentors of new grads. Like, stop thinking that they don't have value just because they see things different. Stop expecting them to show up ready to be confident, competent, and independent because they're not. And recognize that these fast track programs and these massively shortened orientations are creating nurses who are scared out of their minds most of their shifts. Like, number one, if you can take that mindset and apply it to the new grads in your department, I think that you're going to have a much easier time opening the doorways to communication and truly serving the next generation. Because remember, we are their hope and they are our future. And the second call out is to the new grad. Like, we see that you were underprepared. We see that you got rushed through nursing school without truly knowing how to practice nursing. We see that orientation did not prepare you with all of the skills that you need to be successful. And we see that you're struggling. So please don't be afraid to look at your senior nurses and go find that nurse, that educator, that leader that's willing to go elbow to elbow with you and challenge the idea that a YouTube university or a TikTok university is going to close that gap for you. Like, I understand that it's a quick resource and I post plenty of stuff on there for you to consume. But when it comes to like true bedside care, like, I would just really call you up to have the courage to go find a mentor that's comfortable with you saying, I'm not comfortable with this. Can you please go elbow to elbow with me right now in the moment and teach me how to do it? So it's a call up to both the mentors and the leaders and the new grad nurses to know that there's value all across the field. And if we can release this criticism and come at each other on a common ground, believing that questions are opportunities for growth rather than attacks, I think that just those simple little things can go a long way to move mountains towards a more empowered, more encouraged, more confident, more competent next generation of nurses that is going to be serving our community. And by the way, like Joe said, they're going to be serving us. So if they don't serve us well, it's our fault that we didn't teach them well. This has been such an incredible conversation. And as you guys are watching this, we would love to know your thoughts. So drop your comments, post your questions, share your ideas. If you can think of other ways that like new grads feel like they're feeling that we haven't talked about, we would love to hear your thoughts on that because we want this conversation to be part of a solution. And we totally and completely believe in you guys. So much love. And until the next perfect time.